Hello and welcome to the STARChronicle Series, Explorations in SAP S4HANA for the Digital Learner. I'm Adam Dabrowski, and I'm with the STAR Scholars Program at St. Joseph's University. Today, we'll be stepping into the sales suite of SAP's newest software, S4HANA, to examine the sales and distribution process. If your professor has provided you with a sales and distribution process script, you may use it to follow along as we complete the various steps of the sales process. The agenda for this session is broken down into two sections, Concept and Application. In the Concept section, we'll start with a brief overview of the sales process in SAP, followed by an explanation of our Global Bike Incorporated scenario, a review of the SMART and COSO frameworks as they pertain to the sales process, and finally, a listing of the transaction codes needed for the sales process. In the application section, we'll log in to SAP S4HANA and complete the sales process for ourselves. As an overview, the sales and distribution process takes place in the Sales Suite of SAP S4HANA and is used to sell material to a customer. This process can be used to sell trading goods, finished goods, or any other type of product that you wish to sell. The sales process is also known as the order-to-cash process. In this session, we will be stepping into the role of Global Bike Incorporated to see how each step of the sales process is carried out within SAP. After producing STAR off-road bikes in-house and procuring DXTR deluxe touring bikes from Olympic Protective Gear, Global Bike Incorporated, GBI, now has sufficient inventory to sell to their customers. Philly Bikes, a bicycle store based in Philadelphia and one of GBI's most valuable clients, has placed an order for 20 of GBI's DXTR deluxe touring bikes. To process the sale, GBI must complete the steps of the sales process in SAP. To examine the various components of the sales process, we will use the SMART framework. The first step in the SMART framework is S, which stands for Organizational Structure. There are a few items pertaining to organizational structure to understand before we can get into the sales process. The first of these terms, client, represents the database of the company you are working for. Because we are Global Bike Incorporated, we are assigned a 3-digit client number by SAP that needs to be entered anytime we want to access the GBI database. The second piece of structure is the company code, or user. This designates the general ledger of the company that we are working for. Because we are working for Global Bike Incorporated, each employee is assigned an individual company code, or user, that specifies their general ledger and system authorizations. The sales organization identifies the country and region in which we are transacting our sale. As this sale is being transacted from GBI's plant in Miami, Florida, to Philly Bike's store in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, we will be using a sales organization of UE00, which signifies the East Coast of the United States. The distribution channel identifies the method in which GBI sells its products. Because GBI is selling these bikes that have been procured from an external vendor, we are acting as a wholesaler, and will use distribution channel WH. Lastly, the sales division identifies the type of product being sold. Because the DXTR deluxe touring bikes are not produced by GBI, they are classified as bicycle accessories. Thusly, we will use the Bicycle Accessories Sales Division, AS, when selling to Philly Bikes. The second step in the SMART framework is M, which stands for Master Files. Master files are data entries within the SAP database that store information about things such as employees, businesses, and materials, just to name a few. For example, if you have an Amazon account, the information that you entered when you first created your account, like your name and address, serves as your master file within Amazon's database. When you sign into Amazon and make a purchase, your master file tells Amazon things like who made the purchase, how you will be paying for the purchase, and what address the order will be shipped to. The first SAP master file pertaining to the sales process is the subsidiary account receivable. Every time a sale is made to a customer on account, the amount of the sale is entered as a debit in the customer's subsidiary account receivable. Each one of GBI's customers has their very own subsidiary account receivable in GBI's chart of accounts. When the balances of each individual subsidiary account receivable are added together, they equal the balance displayed in the company's consolidated accounts receivable account. The customer master file stores all permanent information about a firm that GBI transacts a sale with. Because we're selling bikes to Philly Bikes, the SAP system will be referencing the Philly Bikes customer master file. The material master file stores all permanent information related to a material that is being sold. Because we're selling DXTR Deluxe Touring Bikes, the SAP system will be referencing the DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike master file. Lastly, the pricing condition master file contains the permanent information related to the selling price of a specific item within the SAP database. As you'll see in one of the first steps of the sales process, a pricing condition of $3,000 must be entered for our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bikes to notify the SAP system that we will sell the bikes for a price of $3,000 each. Moving on to the A, or application process step of the SMART framework, we'll now take a look at the application process of sales. The first step in the sales process is to create a pricing condition for the DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike. A pricing condition is a record within the SAP system that is necessary for the calculation of prices for materials. Because GBI plans to sell the DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike at a price of $3,000 per bike, a pricing condition for that amount must be set in the SAP system prior to creating a sales order. Next, a sales order must be created to enter specific details about a sale to a customer in the SAP system. A sales order is a document that is based off of a sales quotation and specifies the types and quantities of goods that are to be sold to a customer, as well as information such as payment terms and customer-specific information such as billing and shipping addresses. The sales order authorizes the sales process and becomes the principal document or contract between the buyer and the seller. In the case of GBI, a sales order is created when we are contacted by Philly Bikes to transact a sale of 20 of our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bikes for the agreed upon price of $3,000 per bike. After the sales order comes the transfer order. Based on the information provided in the sales order, the transfer order is a document that authorizes the movement and shipment of the product from the vendor's warehouse to the destination. The transfer order is completed through the steps of picking and packing. Picking is the physical movement of the goods from their location in the storage facility or warehouse to the shipping dock and is confirmed via a transfer order. Packing is the physical action of taking the goods picked from the warehouse and packing them in containers suitable for the safe transportation to their destination. After we confirmed the sales order of 20 DXTR Deluxe Touring Bikes to be sold to Philly Bikes, we must pick the bikes from their trading goods storage location in GBI's Miami plant and place them at the shipping dock. Once at the dock, we need to pack them securely so that they can be safely transported to Philly Bike's store. Next, a post-goods issue is created once the shipment of materials sold departs the shipping dock for arrival at the customer's destination. A post-goods issue is a document that indicates that the goods have been shipped to the customer and that a sale has occurred. The post-goods issue is the first point where a transaction entry is posted to the accounting ledger. The entry credits the inventory account by the value of the bikes sold and debits the cost of goods sold account for the same amount. After the truck containing Philly Bike's order of 20 DXTR Deluxe Touring Bikes departs the shipping dock at GBI's Miami plant, we need to create a post-goods issue that automates that entry. At this time, the legal ownership of bikes switches over from GBI to Philly Bikes. The penultimate step in the sales process is to bill the customer for the materials purchased by generating an invoice. An invoice is a commercial document issued by a vendor that specifies the types and quantities of goods or services ordered by a customer, the amount of money due to the vendor from the purchase, and the shipping and payment terms of the order. An entry is posted that debits the accounts receivable account under the name of the customer and credits the sales revenue account. After the truck containing Philly Bike's order has departed GBI's Miami plant, we must now generate an invoice for the order using the SAP system. This invoice will contain the net value of Philly Bike's order of 20 DXTR Deluxe Touring Bikes at $3,000 per bike, as well as the payment terms of the order. After the invoice is generated, it will be sent off to Philly Bikes. The final step in the sales process is to enter the customer's payment of the invoice into the SAP system once it has been received. By entering the payment of the invoice, we can remove the balance paid from the customer's subsidiary account receivable and put it into the cash account. Both full and partial payments of invoices are allowed, but depend on the payment terms agreed upon by the customer and the vendor. As Philly Bikes will be paying for their full order of DXTR Deluxe Touring Bikes in cash, we will enter the payment into the SAP system and trigger an automatic general ledger entry that credits Philly Bikes' subsidiary account receivable and that debits GBI's cash account. The next step in the SMART framework is R, which stands for reports. One of the SAP software's greatest features is its robust reporting capability. Between the thousands of reports that SAP can generate based off of the data stored in the database, there are 4 specific reports that pertain to the sales process. The first of these reports is the invoice payment entry, displayed here in the top left-hand corner. By navigating into the Display Document screen after recording the reception of Philly Bike's invoice payment, we can view the entry made to the accounting ledger that displays the payment of the invoice. Next, the Customer Balance Report, pictured in the top right-hand corner, allows us to see the current and historical balances of our subsidiary account receivable. Once the invoice is sent to Philly Bikes, a debit to their subsidiary account receivable will show up in this report. Once the invoice is paid off, the report will show a matching credit to signify that we've received payment from Philly Bikes. The Sales Order Display Report, shown in the bottom left-hand corner, provides an array of details pertaining to a specific sales order, such as sales order status, document flow, price and quantity information, and so on. We will be using this report several times throughout the sales process to check back on the status of our document flow. Lastly, the document flow, pictured in the bottom right-hand corner, is a report that can be accessed in the Display Sales Document transaction. The document flow displays the current status of the sales order and is a key area for auditors to verify the validity and accuracy of a sales order using the COSO framework, which will be discussed momentarily. If the document flow displays errors or inconsistencies in the steps of the sales process, it may be a red flag to auditors that tells them they may need to acquire more information about the sales order. The last step in the SMART framework is T, which stands for Test Controls. In this step, we will undergo a mini audit to evaluate the completed sales process. The evaluations completed in this step are done to assure the accuracy and completeness of the SAP system's ability to facilitate each step of the sales process. For gathering more information on the employee who authorized the sale, we may want to drill down and locate the audit trail within the process. To ensure the accuracy and authenticity of the sale, we may need to assure ourselves that all information provided in the document flow is accurate. In review of the entire process, we will want to examine every step of the sales process to see where authorization may have been needed and if authorizations were given by the proper user. As mentioned in the reporting step of the SMART framework, we will use a concept called the COSO framework to evaluate the sales order document flow in the context of an audit. The COSO framework is a set of guidelines created by the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations, or COSO, to create and maintain internal controls within a business. By following these guidelines, a firm can assure the quality and accuracy of their financial statements, as well as avoid any potential discrepancies that could cause external auditors to issue a disclaimer of opinion, or even worse, an adverse opinion. In today's business world, the importance and effectiveness of internal controls is emphasized now more than ever, and this trend is expected to continue growing well into the future as the ability of governments and auditing organizations to detect fraud becomes more powerful, and the punishments given to fraudulent businesses become more severe. SAP has traditionally offered a software called GRC, which stands for Governance, Risk, and Compliance, to assist businesses in keeping track of and maintaining their system of internal controls in an increasingly digital world. With the new S4 HANA, SAP has successfully built this technology into their ERP software, meaning that the functions of business, as well as the rules and policies that govern them, can be found in one convenient location. Concepts of the COSO framework can be analyzed using the acronym SPARCHRonicle. S stands for segregation of duties, which ensures that each step of the sales process was completed by a different employee. If segregation of duties didn't exist, one person could theoretically be in charge of both creating and authorizing sales orders, as well as entering the payment for them. And this would create broad opportunities for fraud to occur. P stands for personnel oversight, which checks up on each step of the process to ensure that its status indicates completed or cleared. This ensures that processes such as the sales process flow smoothly. A stands for authorization, which ensures that authorizations by the correct individual are made for each step of a process. R stands for records, which enable users to confirm that the correct records, such as ledger entries or receipts, exist for each step of the sales process. C is for checkup on performance, which means that employees are able to examine the ability of the system to facilitate the sales process, as well as ensure that the sales process is projected to be profitable for the business. L stands for limited access, which goes hand in hand with segregation of duties and authorization to ensure that no one employee has access to transaction codes or areas of the sales process that they do not possess the proper authorizations or permissions to access. Finally, E stands for evaluate controls, which reviews the entire sales process to ensure that the proper number and specification of controls are integrated into each step. By using the COSO framework as laid out by SPARCHRonicle as a method of oversight over GBI's operations, we can assure executives, managers, and internal and external auditors that our SAP system and operations are functioning properly and without undue opportunities for fraud. The last thing we need to do before we log into SAP is review the transaction codes necessary for the sales process. Every transaction in the SAP system is identified by a unique code number called a transaction code, or a T code for short. SAP allows for users to enter these unique code numbers as another means of navigating directly to a transaction. Essentially, T-codes are shortcuts that we can use to access transactions or functions of the SAP system much more quickly. Once we log into SAP, we will add these T-codes into our favorites folder for ease of access. The first of these transaction codes is MMBE, which allows us to view the inventory of our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike. VK31 allows us to enter the pricing condition of $3,000 for our Deluxe Touring Bike into the SAP system. Next, VA01 will be used to create the sales order for 20 DXTR Deluxe Touring Bikes to be sold to Philly Bikes at $3,000 each. After creating the sales order, we will use T-code VA03 to display our previously created sales order and examine the document flow. Next, FD10N enables us to view the balance in our Philly Bikes subsidiary accounts receivable. Once we're ready to pick and pack the deluxe touring bikes for shipment to Philadelphia, we'll use VL01N to create the transfer order to move them to the shipping dock. After the shipment of DXTR Deluxe Touring Bikes has departed GBI's Miami warehouse, we will use VL02N to enter a post-goods issue into the SAP system and transfer the legal ownership of the bikes to Philly Bikes. To bill Philly Bikes for their sales order, we will use VF01 to generate an invoice and send it to them. Finally, we will use T-code F-28 to confirm the reception of Philly Bikes invoice payment and enter it into our accounting ledger. Now that we've completed the concept section of our sales and distribution session, and you've learned a little bit about the background of the sales process and how it works, we can move on to the application section and log into SAP S/4HANA to complete the sales process for ourselves. Hello everyone and welcome to the application portion of our STARChronicle sales session. As you had just seen in the concept section of this session, you learned a little bit about the sales and distribution process in SAP, some of the terms that pertain to the sales process, the SMART framework, the COSO framework of auditing, and some of the different little things behind this process that really help you to understand it. But now that we have that understanding, we can actually hop into SAP for ourselves and complete every step of this sales process. So the first thing we want to do is go ahead and get into SAP, and there are three ways that we can go about doing that. The first of which, if you have the blue and yellow SAP logon chevron icon on your desktop, you can go ahead and click on that and it'll open up our instance menu. However, if you don't, you can always go down to your bottom search bar and type in SAP, and it'll come up right at the top here, your SAP logon app. Or alternatively, you can click on the Windows Start menu to open it up. And if you scroll all the way down to S at this SAP front end folder, you can go ahead and click in and find the application there. So whichever way you use to get into SAP, we can go ahead and open up the instance menu by clicking on the icon. And we see our GUI window here, our SAP Logon 760 GUI. And on the right, you see all of the different instances offered to us by SAP. One thing you might want to make sure of is that if you don't see these lists of instances here, you want to make sure you're in the UW Milwaukee UCC instance. Sometimes you might be clicked on local, and in that case, you wouldn't see any of these instances here. So we can go ahead and click on UW Milwaukee. And each of these different instances here is a different server, and it'll take you into a different SAP software. And they're all offered through the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee. The one we're looking for is S/4HANA. And if we scroll down to the middle of the instance menu, we can see our server right here, Harley, SAP S/4HANA 1709. So we can go ahead and double click on this one, and it'll bring us to our login menu. Now that we're in the login screen for SAP S/4HANA, there are a few pieces of information that we need to enter before we can proceed to log into the system and complete the sales process. If you remember back to the concept section of this session, you'll remember that we discussed the S part of the SMART framework, which stands for organizational structure. So the login menu is a great example of organizational structure because it asks you for three key factors of authentication, which are the client, the user, and the password. So the first thing we want to do here is just confirm that we are in the correct instance of SAP. And you can check that by looking in the information section. So we can check that we are on an instance that's running the Global Bike 3.2 client, so we're good there. And if you look here, it confirms that we are in an instance that uses SAP S/4HANA, so we're good. So the first piece of that organizational structure that we want to enter is the client. And if you remember the definition of a client, it signifies the database of the company that we're working for. And this is a number that's assigned by SAP. And since we're working for Global Bike Incorporated, SAP has assigned us the client number or the database number of 502. So we can type that in the client box. You can think about this in terms of maybe even a larger scale company like a Coca-Cola, whereas in Coca-Cola's SAP system, they would have a specific 3-digit client identifier that was assigned by them to SAP to designate their ledger. So next, if we want to go down to the user field, now this is what authenticates a specific user in the SAP system. So if you were a sales order clerk and you were to log in using your specific username, you could go into the system and you would only see menu options that a sales order clerk would have authorization to use, which was maybe create sales order, view sales order, those type of things. So in our user, we want to authenticate ourselves, and we can go ahead and type in our specific username. So for us, it's learn, in all caps, and then a dash, and then a 3-digit identifier number. Now, the 3-digit identifier number is what identifies you specifically, and it comes into play in a different couple locations throughout the sales process. So you'll want to make sure to keep this 3-digit identifier in the back of your head and keep it handy, maybe write it down, so that you have it on hand throughout the process. So because I am 3-digit identifier 089, I can go ahead and type in mine after learn dash, and this is where you would enter your 3-digit identifier. And then lastly, we want to enter our password, which is kind of the last step of authenticating us as a user in the system before we can log in. So the password in this case is all lowercase star, and then your 3-digit identifier with no spaces. So once we have our client, our user, and our password all entered, we can go ahead and hit the Enter key on our keyboard, and it will allow us to get into the system if all the information that we've entered is correct. And you might get a little message here that SAP prompts you with that's just telling you that you're logging into this server, this instance, using this client, and so on. And all we have to do is just click the green check mark, and we can enter through the menu to get to our SAP Standard menu. Now that we're in SAP Standard menu, there are a few things we'll want to familiarize ourselves with before we can really get into the sales process. So the SAP Standard menu is really kind of the jumping off point in terms of SAP. It allows you to access all the different functions throughout the system that you were authorized to use, and is kind of the main menu, if you will. So the first thing we want to take a look at is just under this SAP menu here, all of these different folders, or what we like to call them as nodes. And they divide up the different functions of the system in different categories. So for example, if you wanted to enter an entry into the general ledger, you could go into accounting, financial accounting, general ledger, and so on. And you could find exactly what you were looking for. But this is a rather cumbersome and kind of long way of finding exactly the transaction that you need, and takes a lot more time, especially if you know exactly what you want to go to. So we can go back up top and click this SAP menu icon to condense our menu. And here's where we start talking about transaction codes, or T codes. So if you remember back to the concept portion of this session, you'll remember we discussed T codes a little bit, and how they're shortcuts to get exactly where you want in the SAP system without having to go through the different menu nodes and take more time than what's necessary to get exactly where you want to be. So as we had just completed the procurement process in a prior session, you'll see that we still have all of the procurement process T codes up here in our favorites. So what we're going to do is we'll actually move these to a folder, and then we'll add the T codes in for our sales process. The first thing we'll want to do, especially if you're coming into the sales process without previously doing the procurement process, is to make sure that T codes are turned on in our system. So we can navigate up to the More icon up on the top menu bar and click down, and we want to navigate to the Extras option, and then down over to Settings to ensure that T codes are turned on within our system. So if we look in this settings window that appears, because T codes are turned on within my system already, this last box here, Display Technical Names, is already checked. If T codes are not turned on in your system, there will be no check in this box. So all you need to do is go ahead and click on it to check it, and go to the bottom right-hand corner of the menu, and click on this little green check mark, and T codes will successfully be turned on within your SAP system. Now that we have transaction codes activated in our SAP system, we'll want to go through and then add the specific T codes pertaining to the sales process into our favorites. Now first, because I have these T codes in my favorites menu from the procurement process, we're going to want to go ahead and add those to a favorites folder so that we don't have a huge list of T codes under our favorites. So if we go up top to the More option on the top menu bar and go down to the favorites option, we'll want to go down to Insert Folder. So if we go ahead and click that, it's going to ask us what we want to name this folder. So because these T codes that I have left over here are from the procurement process, we can go ahead and type in procurement in the folder name field and click the green checkmark icon to create the folder. And now all we have to do is simply click on these individual favorites and drag them down to the procurement folder. And just like that, we can add them in and remove them from our favorites node up top so that we have room to add in our sales transaction codes, and it doesn't get too cluttered, and we can easily find the T code that we want to navigate to. So now that all these are added in the procurement folder, we can go ahead and click the arrow icon to the left to close it up. And now we can move into the process of adding transaction codes into our favorites folder that pertain to the sales process. To add transaction codes into our favorites folder that pertain to the sales process, the first thing we'll want to do is make sure that our favorites folder is highlighted. If we left the highlight and our cursor on the procurement folder and we started adding T codes in, they would be added into the procurement folder instead of the favorites. So we can go ahead and click on favorites here. And then to add our first transaction code in, we'll go up to the More icon on the top menu bar and drop it down and go to favorites again. But this time, instead of inserting folder, we'll want to click on the option below it, which says Insert Transaction. So the first of these transaction codes that we want to enter is MMBE to check the stock inventory of the DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike that we're going to sell. And if we repeat that process for the next few T codes, go to Insert Transaction. To create our pricing condition, we'll want to add our transaction code VK31. And we go to More, Favorites, Insert Transaction. We'll insert the Create Sales Order transaction, which is VA01. And we repeat the process again. And this time, instead of creating the sales order, we'll want to add the transaction code in of VA03, which is to display the sales order. Go to More, Favorites, Insert Transaction. And this time we'll add in the FD10N, which is to check the balance of our customer's subsidiary account receivable. We go to More, Favorites, Insert Transaction. and we'll use VL01N, which is to create a transfer order. We'll go up to more favorites, insert transaction, and VL02N, which is to create a post goods issue. More favorites, insert transaction, and we'll insert our VF01 T code, which is to create that invoice for the customer. So we can go ahead and type in VF01 and add that one. And then lastly, the T code that we'll want to enter is to post the incoming payment from our customer. And the T code for that transaction is F-28. And we can go ahead and click the green check icon. Now, after we have all of these T codes in our favorites folder, these represent all the different steps of the sales process. And we can go ahead and jump into the first step, which is to review the inventory of our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike using T code MMBE. So let's get started by checking the inventory of our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike using our MMBE T code. So we can navigate over to our favorites menu and double click on our first T code. And we're brought to our first of many SAP basic data entry screens. These basic data entry screens will appear anytime that you're trying to generate a report within SAP. Now, these basic data entry screens will prompt you to input a few key pieces of information that will shape the report that you generate based on what you entered. So in this case, because we're trying to generate an inventory report for one of our materials that's stored at a specific plant or a specific location, we need to enter the three key pieces of organizational structure that are material, plant, and storage location. The first of these is our material. So if we click into the material field here, this is where you put in the identifier for a specific material in the database. Now, the SAP system will issue these identifiers for any sort of file that it keeps in the database as a codified sort of name for that material. So because we're trying to bring up the DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike, we'll have to put in our Deluxe Touring Bike identifier in our material field. The identifier for our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike always follows the same syntax. So it's always DXTR and then a 5-digit identifier that specifies exactly which deluxe touring bike we're looking for. Because as you can see here, there are a lot of deluxe touring bikes found throughout the SAP database. So the one that we're looking for is 5 digits that are always 1, 1, and then your 3-digit identifier, because that 3-digit identifier specifies which deluxe touring bike is yours. Because I'm logged into the SAP system as 3-digit identifier 089, what I'll type in for my DXTR identifier is DXTR11089. And as you just saw, you'll get a full auto-populated menu once you type in these values, just as we did originally. But you have to make sure to not click any of these options that are presented. Just because there are so many that get auto-populated, the potential to click on the wrong one, which right here is just off by one single digit, that'll bring up information that you aren't necessarily looking for. So anytime we type this in, we can go ahead and just click anywhere outside of that auto-populated box. The next thing we want to enter, now that we've specified the material that we want to check inventory for, is where exactly that material is stored. Because we keep all of our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bikes in our GBI Miami plant, we'll have to type the identifier for our Miami plant in the plant field. So we can click in, and the identifier for our Miami plant is MI00. And once again, we'll get this auto-populated menu. We just have to click anywhere outside. And now the last thing we need to specify is where within our Miami plant are these bikes stored. Because they're classified as trading goods, they're going to be stored in the trading goods part of our Miami plant. And the identifier for that storage location is TG00. So we can enter that in our storage location field and click out into the menu. And now after we have our material, our plant, and our storage location entered, this is all of the organizational structure we need to generate our inventory report. So if we navigate down to the bottom right-hand corner of the stock overview screen, you'll see the blue execute icon. Now in order to generate our report, we can go ahead and click on this icon to view our inventory. Once in our inventory report for our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike, we can take note of the values that are under the unrestricted use column and the on order stock column, if you have any. So first of all, the unrestricted use column shows us how many of these deluxe touring bikes do we have on hand in our plant that are able to be sold to customers. And because there's a value of 200 here that's listed in our Miami plant in our trading goods section, this means that we have 200 of these deluxe touring bikes that have been previously procured from external vendors that are ready to be sold to customers if they wish to buy some. Now, if you have a value under the on order stock column here, that just means that there is a purchase order of these DXTR bikes that's still in transit. So as GBI is, an active entity and constantly purchases more of these bikes to be able to have enough to sell them, you'll see that currently there is an on order stock of 100, meaning that 100 DXTR bikes have been ordered to keep in our inventory but have not yet been delivered. But the key item for us in this sales process is to make sure that we have enough bikes in unrestricted use to sell to customers if they reach out to us. And we do. 200 is more than enough than we'll need to sell to any customer who comes and asks us to buy some. So now that we've checked our inventory of our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike, we can go ahead back to our SAP standard menu and head on to the next step of our sales process. So we can navigate back to standard menu by clicking this exit icon located in the top right-hand corner of the screen, and it will take us back to SAP standard menu. Now that we've checked the inventory of our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike and confirmed that we have enough in inventory to sell to customers if they reach out, we now have to go in and set a pricing condition for our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike. If you remember back to the concept section of this session, you'll recall that we discussed a master file called a pricing condition. And what this master file does is that it specifies the information needed to calculate prices of a certain material. So because that we've decided we want to sell our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike at $3,000 per bike, we'll go into the pricing conditions transaction and set a pricing condition of $3,000 for our bike. Now, if you remember, we procured these deluxe touring bikes from an external vendor at $1,400 a bike, which means that every time we sell one of these at $3,000, we're clearing $1,600 worth of margin, which is pretty solid. So now we can navigate over to our VK31 T code in our favorites menu and double click on it to navigate to the pricing conditions transaction. Now that we're in the Create Pricing Condition transaction, you can see on the left-hand side are these different folders that contain different transactions related to different aspects of pricing for a material. You have prices, your discounts, maybe taxes, some of the other conditions. But the one that we're looking for is a pricing condition, and that will be found under Price. So if we navigate over to the left of the Price node and click on the arrow, it'll open up a sub-menu of 3 different options. Because we're pricing our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike material, we'll click on this little clock icon to the left of Material Price. And this will give us a screen that at first can seem a little bit confusing. All of these fields here are grayed out, which means you can't enter anything. and there is some technical jargon under variable key here. But the way we can enter in our pricing condition is to click this little paper icon here on the left that says Material with Release Status. So if we navigate to this icon and click on it, it'll take us to an entry screen where we can enter a specific material. Now that we're in the basic data entry screen for our Create Pricing Conditions transaction, there are a few pieces of organizational structure that we have to enter in order to set the pricing condition of $3,000 for our deluxe touring bike. The first of these pieces of structure is the sales organization. Now, if you recall back to the concept section of this session, you'll remember that we talked about the sales organization specifying the country and region in which a sale is being transacted or expected to be transacted in. Now, because GBI, our plant is in Miami, and we deal a lot with customers on the East Coast, our sales organization will be UE00, and that signifies the East Coast of the United States. So you'll see it represents US East, but we can click out of the auto population menu because we want to make sure we don't click anything wrong. Now, the distribution channel is the way in which we sell our product. Now, because these bikes have been previously procured from an external vendor and are now being sold to a customer, GBI is acting as a wholesaler. So the distribution channel that we're using is a wholesaler, or WH, as it's identified in the system. So now we can enter in specific information pertaining to our pricing condition. So if we go down to this Material with Release Status section, you'll see a few different fields. Now, the one we want to enter information in for first is the condition type field. So if we click in here, we'll want to enter the condition of PR00. And in the SAP system, this stands for kind of just standard pricing, and it tells the system that there's no special things that we need to add to the pricing condition. So now that we have that, we can move over into the material field. And here is where we enter the identifier for our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike. So as you remember from the previous step, the syntax for this identifier is DXTR11 and then your 3-digit identifier. So because I'm 089, I will enter in 11089, and I will make sure not to click in the auto-populated menu. And now we want to go over to the amount column. And this is where we actually enter the price that we want to charge for these bikes. So because GBI has decided that they want to sell these bikes for $3,000 per bike, in this amount field, we can type in 3,000. So now reviewing this, we have specified our sales organization, United States East, our distribution channel of wholesaling, and some of the specifics related to our DXTR material. Now we want to save this in the system to make sure that our pricing condition is registered within the database. So if we navigate down to the bottom right-hand corner, we'll see our save icon. All we have to do is click on this, and it will give us a confirmation message that says our pricing condition records have been saved. So now we've successfully set our pricing condition of $3,000, and we can return to the SAP standard menu by clicking the exit icon located in the top right-hand corner of the screen. And this will take us back to standard menu where we can carry on to the next step of the sales process. Now that we've gone through and checked the inventory of our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike and ensured that we have enough on hand to sell to customers, as well as gone through and set a pricing condition for the DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike at $3,000 apiece, we're now ready to sell to customers. Philly Bikes, who is a bike shop based out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, has contacted us at GBI and expressed that they would like to purchase 20 of our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bikes at $3,000 apiece. Now, the first step of processing this order in SAP is to create the sales order, and that's what we'll do now. So if we navigate over to our next T code in our favorites, which is VA01, We'll click on this and enter into it to create our sales order. The first step of creating our sales order is to enter some organizational structure to specify exactly what kind of sales order this is and where it's going to be coming from. So if we click in our order type field here, we'll want to specify that this is a standard order. And the identifier for a standard order in the SAP system is OR1. So we can go ahead and enter that in our order type field. And now we can move down to the organizational data section. So as we see, because the SAP system's getting to know us, it realizes that we're acting out of our sales organization of United States East in our distribution channel of wholesale, but we need to input the division of which we're selling. So if you don't have these sales organization and distribution channel structural information plugged in, you can go ahead and enter them in now. But we need to focus on the division. Now, once again, if you think back to the concept section, you'll remember we discussed sales division being the type of item that we're selling, and we referenced two specific areas, which were bicycles and bicycle accessories. Just in the case of GBI, because the bicycles we're selling have been procured from an external source and not produced in-house, we're classifying our DXTR Deluxe Touring bikes as bicycle accessories. And the identifier for accessories is AS. So we can go ahead and type our accessories into our division and click out. And now that we have all the structure we need to set this sales order up exactly the way we want it, we can go ahead down to the bottom right-hand corner and click on the blue continue icon to enter even more specifics about this sales order. After clicking continue, we're taken to our create standard order transaction. Now this is an entry screen where you enter all the information you would expect about a purchase order, including who are you going to sell it to, when is this order being transacted, and what materials being sold. So the first thing that we need to do is enter in the customer, who is purchasing these bikes. So if we navigate to sold to party, this is where we're going to input the identifier for our Philly Bikes customer. So if we click in the field and then find this magnifying glass search icon, we can go ahead and click to open up our database search window. And we'll want to make sure we're in the customer's general criteria. This is the first one that should appear, but if not, you can navigate to the three-dot icon and click on it and select it from the drop-down menu. Now in here, we don't have to enter any of these specifics. All we have to enter in is our 3-digit identifier in the search term field. So because my 3-digit identifier is 089, that's what I'll enter into the search term field, but here's where you would enter your identifier. And once we have that entered, we can navigate down to the bottom menu bar and select Start Search. And what this is going to do is only bring up the options in the database that contain your 3-digit identifier. And you can tell that by looking in this customer column. And you see that each one of these customers, their identifier ends with your 3-digit identifier. So because we're selling to Philly Bikes, we'll want to navigate down about halfway down the page and find our Philadelphia Philly Bikes customer. And that's denoted by the identifier of 30 and then your identifier. So because I'm 089, my identifier for Philly Bikes is 3089. So once you find your Philly Bikes, you can go ahead and double click on it to select it, and it will populate it here in your sold to party field. The next thing we need to do, now that we have our Philly Bikes identifier in our sold to party field, is enter in a customer reference. Now the customer reference is simply going to be the same identifier as your Philly Bikes customer. So it will be 3 followed by your 3-digit identifier, so in my case 089. And as you can see, we're referencing this identifier for our Philly Bikes quite often. So it'll be very helpful to you to take a moment now to write this number down, or keep it in the back of your head so you don't have to go searching for it when we inevitably use it in the preceding steps in the process. So now that we have these two pieces of information, we'll want to enter a date in for our customer reference. If we click in this customer reference date field, we can click on the icon to open up our calendars to select our date. And we'll want to enter in the current date, today's date. So for me, because it's April 11th today, I'm going to enter in April 11th as the customer reference date. And now we can scroll down to the bottom section of this Create Standard Order transaction in the Sales tab. The Sales tab should be open by default, but if it's not, you can go ahead and click on it to open up this specific data entry here. And if we scroll down to the All Items section, we can find a familiar material field. And in this material field is where we specify the material we're selling. So in our case, we're selling DXTR Deluxe Touring Bikes. So in this material field, we can go ahead and enter the identifier for our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike, which is DXTR110, your 3-digit identifier. So for my case, it's 089. If you have a 3-digit identifier of 075, it will be 11075, so on. Now that we have our material entered, we'll want to go over to the order quantity field and enter in the quantity of how many of these bikes are being sold to the customer. Because Philly Bikes has told us that they want to purchase 20 of our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bikes, we can go ahead and enter 20 in the order quantity field. Now that we have our material and quantity specified, we can hit the Enter key on our keyboard to register all of this information within the SAP system. And now you can see, once all of the information has been registered, it brings up that the order quantity is 20 bikes, and they're measured per bike, which is why is this EA here. You can see that your deluxe touring bike has been populated under item description. It's stored in Miami, so you can see the location here is at Miami. The payment terms here is specified using the identifier of 0001, which stands for pay immediately without deduction. So here, depending on the customer, is where different payment terms would appear in different scenarios. Say the customer wanted to have an extended line of credit or an extended time to pay. This is where you'd see a little bit of differentiation in the payment terms. But because Philly Bikes has said, we'll pay immediately, and GBI agreed to that, you'll see the payment terms are for pay immediately. And if we go up to the top, we can see now that our Philly Bikes identifier has registered in the SAP system and brought up some of the address information. So Philly Bikes is based in 20 Pine Street in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. If we go up even further, we can see the net value field. And this is one of the most important parts of this entire sales order screen because it's telling us the value of the sales order. Because we're selling 20 of these DXTR Deluxe Touring Bikes at $3,000 per bike, those two values multiplied together give us the net value of $60,000. So if we scroll down to the bottom here, we have all of our information entered, and we can go ahead and save this sales order in the system by navigating to the blue save icon and clicking on it. And it will give you a confirmation message that says your standard order with a number has been saved into the SAP system. Now you'll want to go ahead and take a moment to write this standard order number down because similarly to the customer identifier, we're going to be using these standard order numbers throughout this process. So once you have that number written down, you can navigate up to the exit icon in the top right-hand corner of the screen and click it to return to SAP Standard Menu. Once back at SAP Standard Menu, and after completing the step of creating a sales order, we'll want to engage in 3 different steps to kind of check up on the status of our sales order as we proceed through the process. So the first one of these steps is to go ahead and check in on the document flow of our sales order. Referenced back in the concept section of our sales session was the idea of the document flow report and using the COSO framework to evaluate that document flow. Now, what this document flow shows us is basically just every single step of the sales process, and that step has been cleared or completed and has been authorized to proceed. So, to view our document flow, we can navigate down to our next T code, which is VA03, to display the sales order that we just created. Once in our display sales document transaction, we can see that in the order field up top, the number of our sales order created in the previous step is auto-populated here. And that's because the SAP system is intuitively assuming that you're trying to go in and display the document that you just created. Now, for some reason, if your document number isn't entered into this order field, you can go ahead and click in and enter it. But after you have your order number here, you can navigate down to the bottom right-hand corner of the screen and click on the blue Continue icon to display your sales order. In our Display Standard Order screen, you can view all the information that you entered in our previous step of creating the sales order, but now in display format. So you can't go in and change any of this information unless you have proper authorization to do so. The main thing we're looking for from this Display Standard Order transaction is, of course, the document flow. So if we navigate to the top menu bar and find this second Display Document Flow icon that kind of looks like a piece of paper, we can go ahead and click on it and view our document flow as it pertains to the sales order we just created. So as you can see, our standard order that was created in the previous step is displayed here. The quantity of the sales order, which was 20 bikes, is displayed. The net value of that sales order of $60,000 is displayed. And you can see that it was created on April 11th, which obviously is today's date, and we just created it in the previous step. And its status is open. And that means that there are still steps that have to be completed yet before this sales order can get cleared or completed. Now, this status column here will be our most important column to look at as we evaluate this sales order and this document flow using the COSO framework. Because this is a dynamic document flow, and as we go on to complete the various steps of the sales process, this status column will go through each step of the process and the document that goes along with those steps and make sure that it was cleared and it was authorized and it was completed. And say we came in here as auditors to look at this document flow, and that one of the line items of the sales documents under the status column showed a canceled or closed or some other type of error, that's a red flag to an auditor that would signal to them that this is a sales order that needs to be investigated. But as for now, we're in the clear. Our standard order has been confirmed and is yet still open because we still have steps to complete. So now that we've viewed our document flow, we can go ahead back to SAP Standard Menu by clicking the Exit icon in the top right-hand corner of the screen. And once again, to get us back to Standard Menu. And now we'll want to go on to the second step of our mini auditing process, and that's to see how the inventory of our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike has changed since the last step of the process. So if we navigate over to our MMBE transaction code favorite, we can see that our material has been pre-populated in here because the SAP system's getting to know us. If it wasn't, you can go ahead and type it in. But we do need to type in yet our plant, which is MI00 for our Miami plant, and our storage location of trading goods, and the identifier is TG00. And after we have our three pieces of structure in, we can navigate to the bottom right-hand corner of the screen to click the Execute icon to generate our inventory report. So as we can see here, there has been no movement of inventory of these bikes yet. And that's only because the sales order has been created, but no physical movement of these goods has yet been authorized. We'll see that in the transfer order step in a few minutes, but right now know that just because the sales order has been created, no physical movement of these bikes in our warehouse has taken place yet. So we still have 200 bikes in unrestricted use, or the same amount that we started off with. This will change later on, as I had noted, but right now it stays the same. So we can navigate back to SAP Standard Menu by clicking the exit icon in the top right-hand corner of the screen. The last step in our mini audit is to check the balance, if there is any, in our Philly Bikes subsidiary account receivable. The way we do that, if we navigate over to our FD10N T-code favorite and double click on it, we'll be brought to the Customer Balance Display transaction screen. In here, there are three pieces of organizational structure that we need to enter, the first of which being the customer. Now, because the SAP system is intuitive and it's assuming that you're trying to reference the identifier or the customer of Philly Bikes, it already has their identifier entered into this customer field. If it doesn't, you can go ahead and simply type in the identifier for your customer. And once we have that, we can move on down to the company code. Now, if you remember, the company code is the identifier that specifies the ledger we're acting out of. So because we're using GBI's ledger, the identifier is US00. So we can go ahead and type in the company code of US00. And the last thing we need to do is specify the fiscal year in which we want to pull subsidiary account receivable data from. This will always be the current fiscal year. In my case, it's 2020 currently, so I'll type in 2020 into the fiscal year. And once I have these three pieces of structure, I can navigate down to the bottom right-hand corner and click the execute icon to generate our subsidiary account receivable balance. Now you'll get this window that says information and that reads no data was read for fiscal year 2020. Now while this might seem like the SAP system is prompting you with an error, all this message is telling you is that the system is unable to read data for fiscal year 2020 because there is none yet in the database. So in other words, there's currently no balance in Philly Bike's subsidiary account receivable because no transactions have hit the ledger yet. So now that we've confirmed that there's no balance, we can click on the green checkmark icon to go back one step, and then we can navigate back to the SAP standard menu by clicking the exit icon in the top right-hand corner of the screen. Now that we've created our sales order for 20 DXTR Deluxe Touring Bikes to be sold to Philly Bikes, we have to go into the SAP system and create a transfer order, which approves the movement of the Deluxe Touring Bikes from their storage location in the Miami plant to the shipping dock so that they can be shipped off to the Philly Bikes customer. So if we navigate over to the VL01 transaction code and double click on it, we'll be brought to our Create Outbound Delivery transaction that allows us to create a transfer order. In the data entry screen to create our outbound delivery and our transfer order, there are a few pieces of organizational structure that need to be entered to specify what sales order are we acting off of and where exactly are the materials being shipped from. So if we navigate to our first field here, shipping point, we'll want to specify from where the DXTR Deluxe Touring Bikes that have been ordered are being shipped from. Now, because we keep the Deluxe Touring Bikes in our Miami plant, we'll enter the identifier for our Miami plant in the shipping point field, which is MI00. And you'll see that defaults in the auto-populated menu here, but we can click out. We have our selection date in as the current date, but now we have to specify in the system what order that we're trying to complete here, and we're trying to issue a transfer order for. So if we click in this box, this is where we'll enter in our sales order number. So if you have that from the previous steps, you can go ahead and type it in. If you don't remember it, you can click in the field and click this magnifying glass search icon here. And you can see that there are a whole bunch of different criteria up at the top. If we click this drop down, we can navigate down to the sales documents by customer, which is the criteria that will most easily allow us to find our sales order. So if we click this criteria from the drop down, all we have to do is enter our Philly Bikes identifier in the customer field. So if you remember, it's 3 followed by your 3-digit identifier. So in my case, it's 089. And once you have your customer identifier plugged in, you can navigate to the bottom toolbar and click on Start Search. And now it will bring up all of the orders in the system that have been completed using your Philly Bikes customer. Now, as you can see here, there are a few different sales orders in the system for this Philly Bikes customer. But if we navigate over to the right, we can go ahead and see that they all pertain to the same sales document, which is 8. And if you remember from the previous step, that was the number of our sales order. So we can click on the first one here, double click, and that will bring up our sales order 8. So once we have our shipping point and our order number plugged in, we can navigate to the bottom right-hand corner of the screen and click the blue continue icon to bring up information pertaining to our sales order. If you recall from the concept section of our sales session, you'll remember that I had stated that the process of the transfer order is carried out in 2 distinct steps, picking and packing. Now, the first of these steps is picking, and that's what we need to do now. All picking is physically going to the storage location of the DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike in our Miami plant and taking the bikes off of the shelves and moving them to the shipping dock. So in this outbound delivery create transaction, we'll need to navigate to the picking tab, which is the second one over. So we can go ahead and click, and it'll open up a data entry screen where we need to input 2 pieces of structure. The first of which is the storage location. Now we need to specify where within our Miami plant are these deluxe touring bikes being picked from. Now because they're stored in the trading goods storage location, we can enter in the identifier for trading goods, which is TG00. And once that registers, we can go ahead and click out of the auto population box. And now we need to go over to this picked quantity field. Now, sometimes in an order, you can pick partial orders. So for the example of our sales order to Philly Bikes, they ordered 20. Now, if we wanted to pick a partial order, we could go ahead and maybe select 10 of those 20 and move them to the shipping dock. But we want to pick the entire order today. So in this picked quantity tab, we can go ahead and enter in the quantity of 20. Which matches our deliverable quantity of 20 here, and this comes from the sales order. So once we have these pieces of information plugged in, we can go ahead and hit the Enter key on our keyboard to register all this information in the SAP system. So now that it's all registered, we have our storage location of trading goods and our picked quantity of 20. We can see here in overall pick status that this order has been fully picked. The 20 picked quantity matches the 20 deliverable. And now we can navigate to the bottom right-hand corner of the screen and click our Save icon to register our picking into the system. And now you'll see a confirmation message appears here that says an outbound delivery has been saved. You'll want to take a minute, just as we did with the sales order, to write this number down because it's going to be much easier to have this on hand than it will be to search through the system if we need to reference this in the future. Now, once you have this number written down, we can navigate back to SAP Standard Menu by clicking the Exit icon in the top right-hand corner of the screen. Now that we're back at SAP Standard Menu, we've successfully saved the picking portion of the transfer order in the SAP system. Now the packing step is simply taking the items that were picked from the shelves and were placed on the shipping dock and packing those materials up so they can safely be transported to their destination at the customer's store. Now, that packing step is purely physical. It doesn't have any sort of step in SAP for it because it's simply boxing them up and putting them on the truck. So now we can go back into our mini audit and check up on our document flow, the inventory of our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike, and the subsidiary account receivable balance, if there is any, for our Philly Bikes customer. So if we navigate to our display sales order transaction, VA03, the first thing we'll do is check our document flow. Once again, we find ourselves in our display sales document transaction. And here's where we must enter in the number of our sales order if it isn't entered already. So for my case, because it's not entered in, I can simply type in my sales order number 8 and click out. And now to generate the display view of my sales order, I can click on the blue continue icon in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. And it brings up our basic display screen, but if we want to go to the document flow, we navigate to the top menu bar, find our display document flow icon, and click on it. And now we can see that a few new steps have been added to our document flow. The last time we checked on this, the standard order was the only thing that was displayed here, and its status was open. But now that we completed our transfer order and the picking and packing of our deluxe touring bikes, we can see that our outbound delivery document is shown here under status. It's in process because we have yet to officially post a goods issue to signify that those items have been shipped. But our picking request to take those items and place them on the shipping dock was completed. And if you look up at the status of the original standard order, you can also see that that's completed. Because now the second half of this process is shipping them off to the customers, receiving the invoice or sending the invoice off, because we are the vendor in this case, and receiving the payment for that invoice from the customer. So now you can note that as an auditor, everything that we have thus far in the status column is good to go. It's either registered as completed or in process. So after examining this document flow, we can navigate back to SAP Standard Menu by clicking the Exit icon. And if we click it one more time, it'll bring us back. Now on to the second part of our mini audit. We'll want to go ahead and check the inventory of our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike to see if there's been any changes. If we navigate to our MMBE favorite T code, we can once again type in our material identifier if we need to, which is DXTR11 and then your 3-digit identifier, so 089 in my case. The identifier for our Miami plant, which is MI00, and the identifier for our trading goods storage location, which is TG00. Now, once we have these 3 pieces of structure, we can click on the Execute icon in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen to view our inventory. And we can see, just as before, that because our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bikes have not been physically shipped from the factory yet, they're still technically part of our inventory, and we are still legally liable for them. Now, in the next step of the post-goods issue, that is where we transfer the legal liability of the goods that Philly Bikes ordered, which is the DXTR Deluxe Touring Bikes, onto the customer. And that is the step in where we will reduce our inventory account. But for now, there is still the full amount of 200 under unrestricted use. So after we've checked, we can click the exit icon in the top right-hand corner of the screen to navigate back to SAP Standard Menu. And the last step of our mini audit is to check if there has been any addition or subtraction to the balance in our Philly Bikes customer subsidiary account receivable. If we navigate over to FD10N in our T-code favorites, we'll be brought to our customer balance display transaction, where we'll need to enter the identifier for our customer, which is 3 and then your 3-digit identifier, our company code, which is US00, and our fiscal year of 2020 in my case, but whatever your current fiscal year is. And then we can navigate to the bottom right-hand corner of the screen and click our blue execute icon to generate our report. Now, as you'll see, we'll still get this information message that tells us no data has been read for fiscal year 2020. And this is because that there has not yet been any transactions that have impacted our subsidiary account receivable. You'll see this report will change, especially as we hit the inventory step of the sales process. You'll see that the balance of the sales order will finally come into the receivable account. But until then, we still do not yet have a balance. So we can go ahead and click our green checkmark icon and then our exit icon to return to SAP Standard Menu. After creating the transfer order for our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike and successfully picking them from their trading goods storage location in our Miami plant and placing them on the shipping dock, and then packing those Deluxe Touring Bikes up so that they can be safely shipped to Philly Bikes, we can now go in and create a post-goods issue, which is the document that officially approves that the Deluxe Touring Bikes have been shipped off in our truck to Philadelphia, and that the legal liability and ownership of the Deluxe Touring Bikes is shifted from GBI to Philly Bikes. So if we navigate over to our VL02N transaction code, we can double click on it, and we'll be brought to our Change Outbound Delivery screen. Now in here, the SAP system, once again, will be intuitive enough to assume that you're referencing the most recent outbound delivery or transfer order created. Because our number is entered right in here, we can go ahead and click the Continue icon located in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. And now we're brought into a screen that looks very similar to the transfer order step. But now what we need to do is we need to successfully create a post-goods issue. So if we go up to the top menu bar here, we'll see the icon that says post-goods issue. And if we click this once, it will, within one click, successfully create our post-goods issue. And this, again, transfers the legal liability and ownership of these DXTR Deluxe Touring Bikes over to Philly Bikes from GBI and signifies that the truck containing the bikes has left the dock and that it's on its way to Philadelphia. So if you look in the bottom left-hand corner, once again, you will just get an updated confirmation message that says your outbound delivery has been saved. This is the same outbound delivery number from before. So now is another chance that if you haven't already written this number down, you can go ahead and do so now. And once you have that written down, you can navigate to the exit icon in the top right-hand corner of the screen and click it to return to SAP Standard Menu. Moving forward with our mini audit, there have been some changes to some of the steps that we normally check on after each step of the sales process. So if we navigate to our display document flow by clicking on our display sales order transaction, and once again, we can enter our sales order number in the field here if it's not already auto-populated, and navigate to the bottom right-hand corner of the screen to click on the blue continue icon. Now we're brought up to the display standard order screen for our sales order. We can navigate to the display document flow icon on the top menu bar and click on it. And now you can see that one more line item has been added to our document flow. And this is our goods issue, the post-goods issue that we created in the previous step. Now you can see a little bit of change here in the reference value column. So even though the sales order was displaying the net value of the sales order by taking the quantity of 20 DXTR Deluxe Touring Bikes and multiplying it by the price per bike of $3,000, the goods delivery or the goods issue shows the value to us, GBI, of this sale. It shows the value of our inventory. So because we procured these bikes at a cost of $1,400, The system is taking that per bike cost and multiplying it by the quantity of the sales order, which is 20, to give us an internal cost of sales, cost of goods sold, of $28,000, which means that we make a healthy 32,000 margin off of this sale, which is pretty good. It's a pretty high margin. And if we look over in the status column, we can see that our sales order is completed. Our outbound delivery is still in process because the goods have not yet been received by Philly Bikes at their store. But both the picking request, the transfer order is completed, and the post goods issue is now complete. So that signifies that the legal ownership of the deluxe touring bikes has now been shifted to Philly Bikes. So now that we've examined our document flow and where it stands at this point in the process, we can navigate to the exit icon in the top right-hand corner and click it twice to go back to SAP Standard Menu. And now we'll want to check up on the inventory of our DXTR Deluxe Touring bikes to see if there have been any changes. So if we navigate to the MMBE T-code favorite, and we enter into our stock overview data entry screen, we can see that our material, our plant, and our storage location identifiers have been auto-populated. If not, you can go ahead and enter them into their respective fields. And once you have them entered, you can go down to the execute icon in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen and click on it. And this will bring up our inventory report for our deluxe touring bike. Now you can see that we have successfully created our post goods issue, which transfers that legal liability. And after that post goods issue has been created, that is what triggers the depletion or the kind of credit of our inventory of our material. So what was 200 DXTR Deluxe Touring bikes in our unrestricted use inventory prior to the post goods issue is now 180, because the 20 bikes that were ordered by Philly Bikes have now been sent off to the customer's destination and are no longer in our possession. So now that we've taken note that our unrestricted use inventory has decreased by the quantity of bikes sold to Philly Bikes, we can navigate back to SAP Standard Menu by clicking the exit icon, and now we can move on to the last step of our mini audit process, which is to view the customer balance display in our Philly Bikes subsidiary account receivable. To view Philly Bikes balance, we can once again navigate over to our FD10N T code and double click on it. And just as the stock overview, the SAP system might auto-populate your data into these three fields. If it hasn't, you can go ahead and type them in yourself with the customer identifier, the company code, and the current fiscal year. Now, once you have those three pieces of structure, you can go ahead down to the execute icon and click on it to generate our customer balance display for Philly Bikes. And just as before, we see that we get the same message that no data was read for the current fiscal year because no transactions have yet hit our Philly Bikes subsidiary account receivable. So we still see there's a zero balance. We can click on the green check mark, and then once on the exit icon to return to standard menu. As we move into the second segment of the sales process, we now must go through the steps to bill Philly Bikes for their sales order of 20 DXTR Deluxe Touring bikes. In the last step, we created the post goods issue, which signified the legal transfer of ownership of the DXTR Deluxe Touring bikes from GBI to Philly Bikes. Now that the truck containing the shipment of the purchase is on its way to Philly, we must go in and create an invoice that we have to send them so they know how much they owe us. So if we navigate to our T-code favorite VF01, we can double click in to the Create Billing Document transaction. Once in the Create Billing Document transaction, we now need to enter our document number so the SAP system knows what sales order and what goods document that this invoice pertains to. So if we navigate down to the document column under the docs to be processed section, we see that we have an open field here. Now, in some instances, your document number may be pre-populated in this field. If it isn't, you can click in and click our magnifying glass search icon to bring up the search window for our order. So we can take a look at the different criteria by clicking in the three-dot icon. And we'll want to make sure that we are in the billing relevant deliveries criteria. So we can go ahead and select that from the drop-down. And this will automatically bring up all of our goods documents that are in the system. So as you can see, the document that is still in transit from GBI's Miami plant to Philly Bike's store in Philadelphia pops up here. We can double click on this order to populate it in our document column. And then to select it, we can navigate to this little bullet point icon to the left of where the document number is and click in there to select it. Now, once we do this, we can go ahead down to the bottom right-hand corner and we want to navigate to the execute icon. Be sure not to click the save icon because we aren't quite done with this step yet. So once it execute, we can go ahead and click on it, and it will take us to the Overview of Billing Items screen. Because we entered in a specific document number in the previous step, all of the information in this Overview of Billing Items screen will be auto-populated for us. So as you can see, it has the payer as our Philly Bikes identifier, which is 3 followed by your 3-digit identifier. And that auto-populates to Philly Bikes located at 20 Pine Street in Philadelphia. We see that our billing date is today's date, and the net value of the sales order is $60,000. As we remember, that's taking the quantity of 20 from the sales order and multiplying it by the per bike price of $3,000. And we can see that information down here that our deluxe touring bike is populated and the billed quantity is 20. After all this information looks correct here, we can navigate to the Save icon in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen and click it to register this within the SAP system. Now, as you see here, we get a confirmation message that tells us a document has been saved in the SAP system along with a number. Just as with the previous numbers, if you'd like to take a second or two to write this down on paper, it's going to be much easier to be able to track this in the system if you can just type it in off of your paper instead of going through the system to search for it. So once we have this document in the SAP system, it's been saved, we can go ahead and navigate back to SAP Standard Menu by clicking on the exit icon in the top right-hand corner of the screen. Once back at SAP Standard Menu, we once again want to walk through the sub-steps of our mini audit process to review any changes that have been made to the document flow, the inventory of our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike, and the balance, if there is any, in our Philly Bikes subsidiary account receivable. So the first thing we want to do is check the document flow, and we can go over to our VA03 display sales order T-code. If your order number isn't populated in the order field, you can go ahead and type it in. And once that's filled out, we can navigate to the Continue icon in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen and click on it. And this brings up our Display Standard Order view. So if we navigate to the document flow, we go up to the top toolbar, find our Display Document Flow icon and click on it. And we can now see that one extra line item has been added to our document flow. Our newest addition to the document flow is this accounting document line item. And this was created by the last step that we completed, which was the creation and sending out of the invoice to Philly Bikes. Now you'll see that it's not cleared, and the reason why that it hasn't been cleared yet is that even though we've sent out the invoice, we're still waiting to receive payment. If we look at the other line items in the document flow, we can see that everything else is good to go. Our standard order, the first step, has been completed. Our outbound delivery and our transfer order of taking those DXTR Deluxe touring bikes and putting them on the shipping dock has been completed. The goods issue has now been completed because these deluxe touring bikes have left our shipping dock. The liability and the ownership has been transferred over to Philly Bikes, and they've gone on their way to the customer. And now we still have the invoice, which is completed because we created that within the system and we sent that out. But again, as I had mentioned, the accounting document is not yet cleared because we're still waiting on that payment. So we can go back to SAP standard menu after we're done checking the document flow by clicking our exit icon in the top right-hand corner of our screen twice to navigate back. And now we can go ahead in and check up on the inventory of our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike to see if there have been any changes. We navigate over to our MMBE T-code favorite. And if it's not already pre-populated, we can go ahead and type in the identifiers for our DXTR material, our plant, Miami plant, and the storage location of trading goods. Once we have those, we can go ahead and click the execute icon. And we can see that there have been no changes to inventory. And this is what we would expect. The inventory that has been ordered by Philly Bikes has already been moved and shipped out of our warehouse. So there should be no further adjustments to inventory. And we can see that here under unrestricted use. Once we're done checking inventory, we can click on the exit icon to return back to SAP standard menu. And in the last step of our mini audit process, we'll want to check in on the balance, if there is any, in our Philly Bikes subsidiary account receivable. So to do that, we can navigate over to our FD10NT code and double click. And in the customer balance display data entry screen, we can enter in the identifier for our customer, which is 3 followed by your 3-digit identifier, the company code, which is US00, and the fiscal year, which is the current fiscal year, or in my case, 2020. After we have our organizational structure plugged in, we can navigate down to our execute icon in the bottom right-hand corner and click on it to generate our report. And now we can see that a balance has been added to Philly Bikes subsidiary accounts receivable. Because we've created the invoice and sent it off to Philly Bikes, notifying them that they owe us $60,000 for their purchase, we can see that that full net value has been added to their subsidiary accounts receivable. If we look under period, we see it's listed under the 4th period, which is representative of April, which is the month in which this sales order was created, this invoice was created. And we can tell it's an increase to the subsidiary accounts receivable because the $60,000 is listed under the debit column. Now, when we receive the full payment from Philly Bikes, there will be a balancing credit entry to drive the cumulative balance of their subsidiary accounts receivable down to 0. But until we receive that payment, the debit of $60,000 in their subsidiary account receivable will stand. So once we're done examining the balance, we can navigate back to SAP standard menu by clicking the exit icon in the top right-hand corner of the screen, and we can click it again, and now we return to SAP standard menu. The last thing that needs to be done in the SAP system before we can complete the sales process is the entering of the payment of the invoice we sent out to Philly Bikes once it's been received. So say that we've received the payment in full of $60,000, which was the net value of the sales order. And now we need to enter that into the SAP system so that our accounting general ledger lines up correctly. We can navigate over to our F-28 T code under our favorites menu and double click on it to get to the post incoming payments transaction. Once in our post incoming payments transaction, we see that we need to enter data into fields that are very similar to what you see if you were entering a transaction directly into the SAP ledger. The first piece of data that we need to input is our document date. So if we click into the document date field and click our calendar dropdown, we can select today's date from the calendar, so in my case, April 11th. And now the next thing we need, because this transaction is referencing the cash account, is we need to input a reference. Now between operating, investing, and financing, the transaction we're dealing with has the most to do with our operating, the operations of our business. Because GBI is in business as a wholesaler to purchase and sell bicycles, this transaction that we're receiving payment for a sale is classified as operating. So in our reference field, we can go ahead and type in operating as our reference. And then we also want to make sure that up top in the section here, that our type is listed as DZ. That should auto-populate in there, but if it doesn't, you can go ahead and type it in. And because we need to specify the ledger that we're entering this transaction into, we'll want to make sure that our company code of US00 is input, as well as our currency of USD for United States dollars. Next, if we move down to our bank data section, we'll have to input the cash account that we're going to be referencing, as well as the amount that we're getting paid. So if we type in our account field here, we can go ahead and type in the identifier for our cash account. Now, if you don't remember what that identifier is, you can click in the field and then click our drop down, and you can get a favorites list of all of the different accounts in your individual ledger. Now we see up top that our cash account with our 3-digit identifier is listed at the end. So we can go ahead and double click on that to use or select that account. Now, for example, if this favorites list is not populated here, and instead you get a full ledger search as depicted here by this GL account number and company code criteria, all you have to do in this GL account field is type in an asterisk and then type in your 3-digit identifier. So in my case, it's 089. Once that's entered, you can go ahead and click the green search check mark, and it'll bring up your cash account from the ledger. So we can double click on it to select it, and it will populate it in the account field. And now we need to enter the amount of the transaction that is hitting the cash account. Because Philly Bikes paid off their invoice completely at once, we're going to receive the full net value of $60,000 in cash at once. So in the amount field, we can go ahead and type in our $60,000. And now we have everything we need in this bank data section. Finally, we'll want to scroll down to the Open Item Selection field to type in the subsidiary account receivable account that we're going to be crediting this amount out of. So if we enter into our Open Item Selection account field here, you'll want to type in the identifier of your Philly Bikes customer. So remember, that's 3 and then followed by your 3-digit identifier. So in my case, it's 089. So once we have all of this information input, we can go ahead and hit the Enter key on our keyboard to register it. And it will bring up this Process Open Items screen. This screen serves as a summary of the invoice payment that we're about to post before we go ahead and post it. So if we look down here under Processing Status, we can see that in the Amount Entered field, there's a value of $60,000, and that's taken from the fact that in the previous screen, we entered in a $60,000 amount manually. And if we look down under Assigned, this is pulling the net value from the invoice that is being paid by Philly Bikes. So if we look at Not Assigned, we see that there has yet to be $0.00 assigned in this payment. And that signifies that Philly Bikes has sent us the full amount, the full net value of their sales order, and they don't have any remaining balance to pay off. So once we're sure that this Not Assigned equals 0, we can go ahead and post this to the ledger by clicking the blue post icon in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Now, once we do this, you can get a confirmation message that shows that a document was posted in your company code. And you're going to want to go ahead and take a second and write this number down just so we have it on hand. So after you have that written down, we're actually going to take a look at this entry before we go back to SAP Standard Menu. So before you click Exit, if we go up top to the More icon in the top menu bar, and we drop down to this first option of Document, and we go down to Display, it will bring us up a view of the entry that we just posted into the ledger. As we can see, it gives us our document date up top, along with our reference, our company code, and the time period in which it was posted. Now, if we scroll down here, we can see the actual accounts that were affected by this transaction, as well as the amounts that it impacted the ledger for. So if we take a look at the first line item, we see our cash account was debited for $60,000. And that makes sense because we received the payment from Philly Bikes in cash, so we are increasing our cash account. If we look at the next line item, we can see that the subsidiary account receivable for our Philly Bikes customer is being credited for the same amount of $60,000 because they've completely paid off their invoice and don't owe anything to us anymore. So what we want to do now is we want to go ahead and send this off to GBI CEO Art Vandelay. Art wants to make sure that the sales process is flowing smoothly and that we received payment for this pretty sizable order that we just sent out to Philly Bikes. So the way we can do this, if we navigate to this middle menu bar here, we can find this Views icon. And what we want to do is get a sendable view of this report here so that we can send it off to Art Vandelay via GBI email. So if we click into Views and click the drop-down, we'll want to select the first option, which is List Output. Now once we click this List Output, it brings us to a more simplified view of our entry, but it still gives us the necessary information that we want to see and that we want to send to Art. It gives us the entry of the debit to cash and the credit to our Philly Bikes subsidiary account receivable. Now to send this off to Art, we can navigate to the top menu bar and find the envelope icon that says Mail Recipient, and we can go ahead and click on that. After clicking on the Mail Recipient icon, our basic SAP emailer appears, and it has room for our title, the document contents of what we want to say to Art, as well as the space to put Art as the recipient. The first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that the correct entry has been attached to the email so that when Art opens this and reads it, he's looking at the correct item. So if we click over to the Attachments tab, we'll see that one document has been attached to this email. And to view that document, we can go ahead and double click on the attachment, and it'll bring us to the view of the entry that we were just looking at. It shows us our debit and it shows us our credit. So if we click this blue back icon to the left of the SAP logo, we'll be brought back to the emailer. And now we can go ahead and throw in the recipient, the title, and a little bit of a summary. So we can click on the Document Contents tab to navigate back to our basic view. And now we need to add a few elements to this email to make it more presentable. The first element we need to add is the recipient. We need to make sure that this email will get sent off correctly to Art Vandelay and no one else within the GBI organization. If we navigate down to the recipient section of the emailer, we can see our recipient field here. And if we click in and type in Art's first name, A-R-T, and go ahead and hit the Enter key, it will bring up Art Vandelay automatically because the SAP system knows that we're trying to reach Art. The next thing we need is to change our title to be more descriptive and elaborate a little bit more about what Art is going to see and read about when he opens this email. The current title of Display Document Data Entry View isn't very descriptive to show exactly what Art is going to see. So we can go ahead and get rid of this and type in a more presentable title and something that describes a little bit more of the contents of the email. So here's where you're going to have to use your creative skills a little bit and write your own title of this email so that when Art opens up his inbox and sees your email, he'll instantly be intrigued, he'll know what is attached in the email, and he'll want to read it. So I'll let you type in your title, and I will type one in as an example. As you can see, I typed in an example title of Entry to Record Philly Bikes Payment, but please make sure that yours is different from this title. It's a little bit more elaborative and goes into more detail, maybe uses some different words, something that's really going to be eye-catching so that when Art opens up his inbox, his eyes gravitate to your email. So the next thing we'll want to do is type in a 3 to 4 sentence summary of exactly what is contained in the attachment. Now, this is where we have to use our creative and analytical skills a little bit to really dissect and break down to Art what this entry that's attached, what it means. So Art, who's coming from a C-level perspective, wants to know the basics of what this entry means for GBI. He wants to make sure that if this sales order or this invoice payment were to be audited, that he wouldn't need to worry and that it would clear the audit. In your summary, you may want to consider things like how much was the invoice and the payment for. Maybe could GBI sell these deluxe touring bikes at a higher price? What customer did GBI receive this payment from, and so on. I'll enter in a simple one-sentence summary, but just know that in your email to Art, you should have 3 to 4 sentences that are descriptive, analytical, and really evaluate what the entry attached to this email means. Now that you have your 3 to 4 sentence summary, along with your eye-grabbing title, the recipient listed as Art Vandelay, and the accounting entry attached to the email, you can go ahead and send this off to Art by navigating to the top menu bar and clicking the send icon that is denoted by an envelope. Now once it's sent, you'll be brought back to the entry view screen, and from here we can navigate back to SAP standard menu by clicking the exit icon in the top right hand corner until we get back. One more time. And now we're back at SAP standard menu. Now in addition to the accounting entry for the payment of the invoice, Art has also requested to see the completed document flow. So by going through our mini audit process one more time, we'll be able to send that document flow off to Art Vandelay so that he can rest assured that this entire process from the creation of the sales order to the reception of the customer's payment would be able to clear an audit if it were to be brought up. So if we navigate to our VA03 display sales order transaction, we'll be brought to our display sales document screen. And if our sales order isn't pre-populated in the order field, you can go ahead and type it in. And once it's in there, we can click on the blue continue icon in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. And now that we're in the display standard order screen, we can navigate to the document flow by going up to the top menu bar and clicking on our display document flow icon. And now we're brought to a completed document flow. To review each step of this sales process as it's shown in the document flow here, we started off with the standard sales order of 20 DXTR deluxe touring bikes to be sold to Philly Bikes at a unit price of $3,000. And we can tell that that step was completed because it shows under the status column as completed. Up next, we created a transfer order to approve the picking and packing of our DXTR deluxe touring bikes from their trading goods storage location in our Miami plant to our shipping dock. And we can tell that this was completed based off of the status in the status column. Up next, we issued a post-goods issue to transfer the ownership and the legal liability of our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bikes from GBI to Philly Bikes, and also to signify that the truck containing the shipment has successfully left the dock at GBI's Miami plant and has set course for Philadelphia. This step has been completed, as shown in the status column. Now we move on down to the next step of the invoice, which was completed after we created and sent out the invoice or the bill to Philly Bikes, charging them $60,000 for their full order of 20 DXTR Deluxe Touring Bikes. And finally, after the payment was received of the invoice and entered into the SAP system successfully, there is no balance remaining in Philly Bike's subsidiary account receivable, and thusly, the last step in the sales process is cleared. To share the good news with Art that the sales process has been successfully completed and that it would indeed pass an audit if auditors were to come in and look at it, we need to send it to him via email. So if we navigate up to the top menu bar here to find our printer icon, we'll click the arrow to the right of that printer icon and select the third option down, the Print Preview of View. Now clicking the Print Preview of View option will provide us with a copy of the completed document flow that is able to be sent over email. So to send this to Art using the SAP emailer, we navigate up to the More icon and click it to bring the drop-down menu up. And if we navigate down to System, over to List, and down to Send, we'll want to click on this, and clicking Send will open our SAP emailer. Similar to the email we sent Art to send him the entry in the accounting ledger that showed Philly Bike's completed invoice payment, we need a few elements here to spruce this email up a little bit and make it into a more presentable letter that we can send off to Art, who is the CEO of GBI. The first thing we need is to check if the document flow attachment is successfully attached to the email that we'll send him. If we click over on the Attachments tab, we'll see that a document flow has been attached. And just to double check, we can double click on this document flow attachment and see that it is indeed the correct completed document flow that we want to send to Art. So once we make sure of this, we navigate to the back icon to the left of the SAP logo and click on it. And this will bring us back to our emailer. So now to enter in our recipient, our title, and our summary, we can click back into the Document Contents tab. The first element we need in the Document Contents tab to make this a more presentable email is to attach Art Vandelay as the recipient. If we navigate down to the recipient section of the emailer to the recipient field, we can once again type in Art's first name and hit the Enter key on our keyboard, and it will populate Art in the recipient field. So the next thing we need is a descriptive title that goes ahead and shows Art, even before he opens the email, what he's going to be examining. So we navigate up and we can delete the default document flow title, and we can enter in a title of our own that is much more descriptive and it's eye-catching, and as soon as Art opens his inbox, he can go ahead and find it and click into it and know exactly what he's getting into. So I'll once again enter in a title as an example, but you'll need to create your own title that's more elaborative and it's more analytical and explains to Art what he's going to be reading about in the email. Now that I've put in the example title of completed document flow from sales order and that you have inserted a title of your own, we can move on to the main document content section and type in another 3 to 4 sentence summary of the evaluation and analysis of this document flow that's attached so that Art can easily understand it. Once again, you'll have to use your analytical and communicative skills to type in a well thought out 3 to 4 sentence summary of the document flow, But I'll type in an example, but please make sure that yours is different from mine and is more descriptive and explains better the COSO framework and the theory behind the document flow. After you've completed your 3 to 4 sentence summary, we can do a quick review that we have all the elements necessary for a good email, which are a descriptive title, the summary itself, we have Art Vandelay listed as the recipient, and we have our document flow attached. After we've checked we possess those 4 elements, we can go ahead and send this off to Art by clicking on the send icon, but with the envelope up on the top menu bar, and click on it, and it will send it off to Art. So now we can go ahead and click on the exit icon to navigate all the way back to SAP standard menu. To complete our mini audit process, we'll want to go through one last time and check on the inventory of our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike, as well as the balance, if there is any, in our Philly Bikes subsidiary account receivable. If we navigate up to our MMBE Stock Overview Transaction Code, we can once again type in the identifiers for our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike material, which is your DXTR11 and your 3-digit identifier. The identifier for our Miami plant, which is MI00, and the identifier for our storage location of trading goods, which is TG00. So once we have those 3 pieces of structure, we can navigate to the bottom right-hand corner of the screen and click on the execute icon. And we can now see that inventory levels are the same as before. After the post-goods issue went out, that is when the goods and the bicycles were removed from our unrestricted use inventory, and there hasn't been any transactions since then that would have affected this inventory. So it stays the same at 180. Now that we've checked the inventory, we can go ahead and click the exit icon to go back to SAP standard menu. And now the last thing we want to do is to check the balance in our Philly Bikes subsidiary account receivable. We can navigate over to our FD10NT code and double click. And then here we can enter the structure of our Philly Bikes customer identifier, which is 3 followed by your 3-digit identifier, our company code of US00, and the current fiscal year, which in my case is 2020. So once you have these 3 pieces of structure, you can go ahead down to the bottom right-hand corner of the screen and click the execute icon. And we can see now that because we entered Philly Bikes payment into our accounting general ledger, there is an equal credit entry to this $60,000 debit entry. And this signifies that Philly Bikes has paid off the entire amount that was previously held in their subsidiary account receivable, and now the balance of their receivable drops back down to 0. So once we see that this complete payment has arrived and has been removed from Philly Bikes subsidiary account receivable, we can navigate back to SAP standard menu by clicking the exit icon in the top right-hand corner of the screen. And one more time, and now we're back. And with that, we've completed the sales process in SAP. As a quick review of what we did today, we started off in the concept section, reviewing some of the background and the framework as it pertains to the sales process. We reviewed the SMART framework. We also reviewed the COSO framework and put it in the context of auditing the sales process. After the concept section, we hopped into SAP in the application section and completed this process for ourselves. We started off by checking the inventory of our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike to ensure that we had enough on hand to be able to sell to customers. After that, we went in and created a pricing condition for our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike of $3,000. This pricing condition told the SAP system that every individual DXTR Deluxe Touring Bike was to be sold at a price tag of $3,000. After creating the pricing condition, our customer, Philly Bikes, reached out to us and expressed interest to buy 20 of our DXTR Deluxe Touring Bikes at a price of $3,000 per bike. To reflect this interest, we created a sales order which contained the quantity of 20 DXTR Deluxe Touring bikes at $3,000 each, and that was assigned to Philly Bikes. Up next, we went through and created a transfer order by way of picking and packing. In the picking step, we physically went to the trading goods storage location of our Miami plant, where our DXTR Deluxe Touring bikes are stored, and lift them on the shelves and move them to the shipping dock. In the packing step, we took the DXTR bikes and we packed them safely and securely so that we wouldn't need to worry about them getting damaged on their way to the customer in Philadelphia. After approving the shipment of goods via the transfer order, we went through and created a post-goods issue. The post-goods issue was the document created to authorize the transfer of liability and ownership of the DXTR Deluxe Touring bikes from GBI to Philly Bikes. This also signified the time when the truck carrying the full shipment departed our plant at Miami and left for Philadelphia. After the post-goods issue, we went into the SAP system and created an invoice containing the full net value and the full quantity of Philly Bikes sales order to send off to them in order to bill them. After that, we received payment for the invoice from Philly Bikes and entered it into the SAP system so that our accounting ledger could match up with the cash on hand that we received. Finally, we completed a mini audit throughout the entire sales process to check up on the document flow to make sure that every document associated with each step of the sales process was completed and cleared. We checked up on the inventory of our DXTR Deluxe Touring bike to ensure that the inventory was being removed at the correct time, not beforehand, not afterwards. And we went through and checked the balance in our Philly Bikes subsidiary account receivable to make sure that the correct amount of the posting was added to their subsidiary account receivable at the correct time. This concludes our sales and distribution in SAP S/4HANA session. I hope that you learned a little bit from this session about how the sales process works, both in SAP and conceptually. I'd like to thank you for joining me today, and until next time, I'm Adam Dabrowski, and this is the STARChronicle Series, Explorations in SAP S/4HANA for the Digital Learner. Thank you.